What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Tomatoito Boxing Show. And this is an episode that continued to get away from me all week. And for a multitude of reasons. Either I was just extremely busy to be able to come to it and get around to it, or the other reason was that I was waiting for my buddy to join me once again, since we ended up doing the preview episode to see if he could jump on this with me and do the recap, because it was something else to witness what happened to Subriel Matias. It was odd, and this is the episode that I've been holding off of the whole week, and I just couldn't wait any longer. We got to talk about it because the so-called Boogeyman of the 140-pound division was dethroned on Saturday night by Liam Paro. And on the preview episode, you guys hear me talking very hesitant because I knew what Liam Paro had. That's what was bugging me. It's hard to pick right now that we know what happened and the after or the post results. We know that Liam Paro ends up dethroning Subriel Matias, becomes the newest champion at the 140-pound division. We knew that Liam Paro was a very solid fighter with very good boxing pedigree, who had done the rounds and had garnered such attention and made such a name for himself through sparring sessions and training sessions with top opposition, with top level names within the boxing organization. And so many considered him to be the most versed or the best versed fighter coming out of Australia today. And that's saying a lot because we have Tim Tszyu competing out at 154. We have the Maloney brothers down at 115, 118. George Kambosos, who was the unify champ at 135. So Liam Paro, just one division up, one division north of what George Kambosos had accomplished. He needed a shot, and he finally got his shot. When you looked at the fight on paper, it's hard to pick. And so, of course, on the preview episode, both my partner, El Cholo Travieso, who was joining me on that episode, and myself, neither one of us, although one of the two of us had it very one-sided for Subriel Matias. Obviously, very impressed, and he's a very, very big fan of Subriel Matias, his body of work, and I ended up picking based on body of work, right? I look at the resume, and Liam Paro had his biggest win to date had to be that of Montana Love, or against Montana Love. The way that he picked them apart, I was a lot more impressed than most were. Most weren't too impressed because they didn't think very highly of Montana Love. Now that we know what happened to Subriel Matias, all of a sudden you got people saying that Subriel Matias was a joke, that he was a hype job, that he was fake. Of course, because people are coming out to defend the legacy of legends such as Felix Tito Trinidad or Miguel Cotto. And everybody's starting to make Subriel Matias, or was making Subriel Matias, to be the next Tito Trinidad. You can't deny his body of work, and that's the reason why we both ended up picking Subriel Matias to be successful, being that every single one of his wins, he was like a mini Better BF. Every single one of his wins was by knockout. 20 knockouts going into this fight, and then the one defeat that he had was a decision loss, not a stoppage loss, and he comes back and avenges it with a knockout. So he had a blemish on his record, but it was exactly what we just talked about right now. He comes back and avenges it with a knockout, and ever since then, he has the hands and the power to put his opponents away. But here he goes, the pressure that I was talking about, not just the type of opponent that Liam Paro was, where I was seeing that Liam Paro would complicate the fight for him, and he's one of those fighters that can complicate things and make it a difficult type fight or a difficult night for the opponents as far as them executing their game plan, because he disrupts it. The way that he fights and the way that he fought Subriel Matias was exactly that. He's very technical, very strategic, and what he did to Subriel Matias was basically outbox him, outjab him. He started attacking the body early, and he mixed up his attack, and whenever he had a chance, he would tie up Subriel Matias, either clinch or hold, and then create space. Back up, and then go back and let a few more punches go. That jab was so consistent for Liam Paro that he ended up basically dictating the pace and the rhythm of the fight to an already flat-footed Subriel Matias. He's not the most elusive fighter, Matias. He doesn't have the greatest footwork, but he is a come-forward fighter, and he is so good with his hands. He possesses such power that he's able to corner and cut off his opponents with his power. As soon as they try to scurry either right or left, he ends up landing a hook either to the hip or to the head and gets him back into the center in front of him to where he could unleash more damage. That's how Subriel Matias usually preys on his opponents. Liam Paro didn't let him do that because he would tie him up and let him go. Towards the end of the fight, you see Subriel Matias fighting with his gloves down, walking forward with his gloves down, with his mouth wide open, just gassed. And a lot of the pressure, which is what I was mentioning on the preview episode, in my opinion, had to be the fact that he was fighting in front of a home crowd. His big return, of course, it weighed on him. Of course it weighed on him. You could just tell that the people were on the edge of their seats, the home crowd at the edge of their seats, just ready to jump and celebrate at anything that Subriel would do. Any type of sign of offense, people were just screaming their hearts out and just cheering for Subriel Matias. It was very evident towards the close of the third round where Subriel Matias finally started letting his hands go and finding success. Then he goes flat again. And then by the end of the sixth round, that was the strongest, where they're breaking from a clinch and he starts landing uppercuts and starts sending Liam Paro towards the ropes, on sending him to his back foot to fight on his back foot. And Subriel starts lunging forward, landing punches as the round comes to a close, and the people just erupted in the arena. Tito Trinidad being there present. It's hard to imagine that all that attention, all that pressure of having to perform in front of your home crowd, the lights, the glamour, the recognition, not wanting to let anybody down. Your family's there, your friends are there, the legends that were present, not wanting to let anybody down, wanting to come away with a victory in impressive fashion, forcing yourself to fight a different way than you normally fight, ended up weighing on him. And it was very evident, in my opinion, it was very evident that all that pressure amounted to a flat performance that we witnessed from Subriel Matias. Liam Paro had a game plan, and his game plan was to stand in front of Subriel Matias, to try to withstand the storm. He anticipated the storm to be coming between the third and sixth round, maybe the fourth and eighth round. And he was going to weather the storm, stay on his feet, try to jab his way to a defensive position, try to weaken the body, and just make it a boxing fight. He was able to get away with almost everything in his game plan by tying Subriel Matias up time and again. Even in the opening in the opening portion of the fight, where Luis Pavon, who's also a Puerto Rican referee, if I'm remembering correctly, he ends up being very aggressive on the corner of Liam Paro and ends up taking a point away from him for punching behind the head, where both fighters were doing it. If anything, Liam Paro, from what I saw, and I've been wanting to, I saw several clips on this, trying to catch the flaw, and all I could see is that when he was hooking or looping, Subriel would duck his head or lean his head forward almost into the chest of Liam Paro, and Paro's punch, his left hand, would end up wrapping behind the head of Matias. Now, it was already in motion, so could he have stopped? Maybe not, but he was already in motion of throwing the punch, which was very difficult, and Subriel would be leaning forward almost into the chest, in the chest cavity of Liam Paro, and that would end up causing that back of the head punch or slap. The referee ends up deducting a point, and so you knew that if it was going to go to points, it was going to be tough for Liam Paro to pull off a decision in Puerto Rico, in a home crowd, in front of a home crowd, and possibly to experience a little home cooking if it was to be a tight fight. It went to the scorecards. It goes to the scorecards with nothing significant, no major drops happening in the fight or anything shocking. So it was going to be a tight scoring fest where, when it comes down to those home crowds, we've seen time and again where it could get a little muddy. Things could get a little muddy. And lucky for the boxing world, for the boxing fans, the referees got it right. Joan Basile, 116-111. And he gave it to Liam Paro. Gerardo Martinez and Carl Zapia each awarded Liam Paro 115-112. This was a unanimous decision win for Liam Paro, and he becomes the newest 140-pound champion in an already stacked division. So now we got Teofimo Lopez, who's going to be active and defending his title against Steve Claggett, who's a contender, if you may, and definitely a stay busy fight for Teofimo Lopez. But again, we see that these fights could get complicated, and if anybody complicates things for themselves, is that of Teofimo Lopez, who tends to fight to the level of the opposition and ends up making fights harder than they should be for himself. And then when it's a big marquee name, he ends up performing in an insane fashion, in a highlight type fashion, highlight reel type manner. But when he fights somebody who's lesser known, he fights down to that level of opposition, like when we witnessed it with Pedro Campa, or then Sandor Martin, who was relatively unknown to the world, and he complicated that fight for himself. Ends up making it a tit for tat type fight, and then leaves it up to questionable decisions and puts it on the hands of the judges. Liam Paro is that type of opponent that makes a fight difficult for anybody that he steps in the ring against. And now that he's the newest champion, Teofimo, who's going to be active against Steve Claggett, that's one of the champions currently. Devin Haney has been awarded his that fight with Ryan Garcia has now been deemed a no contest by the New York State Athletic Commission, and Ryan Garcia has been suspended for a year. Also, it looks like most of the other state athletic commissions will be following suit and honoring what New York has deemed as punishment for Ryan Garcia. So it's going to be hard for Ryan Garcia to get sanctioned in any state within this next year unless he goes outside of the country. And a lot of people are talking about Ryan Garcia and Conor Benn at welterweight, since Ryan Garcia was challenging Errol Spence. If he's suspended stateside, well, he might as well go do what Conor Benn came to do to the U.S. since he wasn't getting sanctioned out in the U.K. Maybe they could go stage this in Saudi Arabia or somewhere else. Maybe out in Mexico. I don't know, somewhere else. But that would be a potential fight. So that's your other champion. Devin Haney has his WBC title. He also went to purse bid with Sandor Martin, whom we just mentioned. He's the WBC's mandatory for that title. And then you have Alberto Puello, who just defeated Antoine Russell on the undercard of the Tank Davis-Frank Martin fight. And he ended up getting the WBC interim version. So you have the top contender, Sandor Martin, the interim champ, Alberto Puello, who just gave the first blemish on the resume of Antoine Russell and picked up a interim version of his title. Someone who had also popped hot when he was in line to face Rolly Romero for that WBA title a while back. So Alberto Puello is now lining himself up for the WBC title. Devin Haney has since come and said that he's going to take time off of boxing. Some thinking that he's going to retire, or based on what he's saying. So if that happens, Bob Arum has come out and made an offer to Devin Haney that if he drops the WBC title, then he'll pursue a fight with Teofimo and Devin Haney for Teo's title. But again, Teo's busy. He's got an opponent and he's probably overlooking him, and this is what's going to happen. Subriel Matias, overconfident, in my opinion, definitely overlooked Liam Paro. He had everything going for him, and he mentions it in the post-fight interview. He mentions it that it's easier for him to fight in other territory, in unfamiliar territory, because he feels that the pressure lies on the side of the opponents, not so much on him, and he fights with a different level of urgency where he wants to go in there and destroy the opponent instead of being so overconfident and so comfortable as he was this past Saturday night, and he showed it with his performance. It's almost like it was a given that he was going to walk away with it one way or another, and he lost his title now and has another loss in his record now. So the Boogeyman gets exposed. But in essence, I think it wasn't so much what Liam Paro did. I really feel that Subriel Matias is the one that threw this one away. He got outboxed, he got outpunched, he got outsmarted, but I think it was a multitude of things that happened here that caused Subriel Matias to drop this fight. And of course, on top of that, having a boxer like Liam Paro with his pedigree coming at you and making the fight difficult as well. Everything just played right. Everything aligned itself perfectly for Liam Paro to become champion this past Saturday night. And everything aligned perfectly against Subriel Matias. And a lot of it was possibly self-induced, right? Being so comfy, taking it for granted, being so overconfident, overlooking the opponent, just having so much faith in his talent that he figured he was going to figure it out one way or another once he's in there, and it got away from him instead of sticking to a game plan or executing his game plan to begin with, because he did nothing. He just went in there, walked forward, threw punches when he could. It's obvious that his power is real, because you could see Liam Paro's expressions on the corner. There were several rounds where he was starting to doubt himself, and he would get back up and go back in there. You would see those expressions that he was hurt. And he was hurt on several occasions, but he ended up answering the call and standing his ground and pulling this out. So Devin Haney goes to purse bid, upset that Eddie Hearn and Matchroom didn't make a bid. Top Rank ends up winning the bid for Sandor Martin and Devin Haney. And a lot of speculation whether Haney's going to drop the title. If he does, then we got Puello and Sandor Martin for the full version title. And then, or if he drops, he could go fight Teofimo and entertain that offer that Bob Arum is throwing out there for him. If he honors the purse bid, he would still make a good chunk of change, and it would be a difficult fight for him with Sandor Martin. The Spaniard is similar to Liam Paro. He'll complicate the fight for his opponents. And he did it to Teofimo Lopez. He did it to Mikey Garcia. He's a very, very good, smart boxer, strategic boxer, Sandor Martin, and he could complicate things for Devin Haney as well. So that's how the landscape is looking right now. And then, of course, the other champion, Pitbull Cruz, who lifted the title from Rolly Romero. And he's going to be fighting in August, also active, defending it against former lightweight Rayo Valenzuela, who's moving up to challenge Pitbull for his title. Mexican against Mexican-American. That should be an amazing, amazing fight for as long as it lasts. I don't think that one goes to the judges. That one for sure is going to have some knockdowns and potentially a knockout. That's going to be a fun fight to witness. All champions active, all champions engaged, and we'll see what comes next for Liam Paro. Very interesting fight. I don't think there's going to be a rematch between him and Subriel Matias, because it was that type of fight where it doesn't really warrant a rematch. Maybe they'll run into each other down the line, but Boogeyman of the 140-pound division, no more. That has been answered. There's a blueprint now of how to defeat Subriel Matias, and all you have to do is just basically catch him on an off night. Will he have another off night? Well, he shouldn't have this past Saturday, and he did. So anytime that there's a little bit of overconfidence or too much comfort on behalf of Subriel Matias, you can catch him on an off night. You know, I mean, we'll see how he bounces back and how he comes back. This was supposed to be his big arrival to the main stage of the boxing world and become a household name, or start knocking on the door of becoming a household name for the boxing world by doing it in front of his home crowd, being the headliner of his event, being a champion, retaining in such a fashion, and just garnering the attention of the boxing world. Instead, he ends up being exposed or getting beat in a large scale for everybody to see. And now there's a blueprint. At the minimum, if this is not the way to beat Subriel Matias, now you got a way to start formulating a plan. And Liam Paro has created that for you. So the 140-pound division, super, super, super open right now. The landscape is wide open. Teofimo Lopez seems to be the man right now. The boogeyman who was Subriel Matias, no more. No one's staying away. Teofimo Lopez, none of these guys have to fight him now. Maybe this made Subriel Matias more human, and now other fighters are going to want to take the challenge because they're not really scared of him. Now they have something to start formulating a plan like we were talking about, and he'll get some decent fights. But it was such a loss that was so unexpected that it dropped Subriel Matias really, really low. His stock really took a hit with this loss against Liam Paro. And who knows? I mean, now we're looking at him bouncing back with maybe one of the other contenders, or maybe he'll fight an Alberto Puello, or maybe an Antoine Russell, or somebody to stay busy, right? Or like an Arnold Barboza, somebody that's trying to make their way up. But I don't see Subriel Matias going in straight for a title because it was that kind of loss. So Pitbull being active, you got Teofimo being active, you got Devin Haney in limbo. We went from Shakur retiring to Ryan Garcia retiring to now Devin Haney potentially retiring. Everybody just keeps throwing this out there so lightly. We'll see what happens there. We'll see how that pans out. But Liam Paro, congrats. Australia has a new boxing champion. And impressive for Liam Paro to have pulled this off. And I'm glad that I got to put the episode together because it was something that was lingering and the days got the best of me, but it's something that could not go unmentioned. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. We got plenty more stuff to come. It was kind of this is going to be kind of an off weekend for boxing. So Divino Espinosa is going to be on tap. And so that's, of course, the featherweight division, the 126-pound division. So we got that episode coming up for you guys. And other than that, we'll have a few days to take a breather before we get back into full motion action as we await a little bit over a week away from the BAM Gallo Estrada big fight at 115, the big showdown that has been looming for some time. And a lot of disdain between these two fighters, a little bit of hate between the two fighters. So it's going to be very entertaining. So we have a few days to get to that. Next up is going to be Divino Espinosa against Sergio Chirino. And so we'll cover that one. And but this is one that I just couldn't let get away from me because it's an important one. It's an important one that just opened the landscape at 140 pounds, a landscape in that division that continues to change as we've seen titles change hands so often in recent history in that division. So very, very interesting turnout. Very interesting the way that fight played out. And Liam Pero's no joke. I was hesitant calling it. It's just hard to go against the heavy favorite when he's such a heavy favorite in the way that he's been winning. Somebody passed away because of the beating that they undertook at the hands of Subriel Matias. The knockout record that he had going for him. It's not like he's a hype job. For people that started saying this, that he got exposed, that he's a hype job, that he's fake, that those people don't know anything about the sport, because how do you just discard the 20 knockouts, that record that he put together against good level opposition and some undefeated fighters themselves who would have been knocking on the door of a title and were knocking on the door of a title if they hadn't run into Subriel Matias. So no, he's not a hype job. He had an off night and he got caught. He had an off night on top of that, filled with pressure of having to perform and shine in front of his crowd, in front of his home crowd. He had all that weight on him. And so, yeah, of course, it's easier. It's easier for him to say, I'd rather fight in somebody else's home turf because it feels like it's less pressure. And he fights with a little more urgency is what he ended up saying afterwards. But yeah, post-fight interview, very humble Subriel Matias. And he even mentions at one point that he felt humiliated to have performed in the way that he did in front of his home crowd. So very distraught Subriel Matias. This is one that we got to keep an eye on, a fighter that we got to keep an eye on. And hopefully he doesn't take too long of a layoff, because this will continue lingering for him, and the questions are going to continue to rise in his head of whether he can still do it or not. He needs to get back in there and shake the cobwebs and get back in action. So I'll leave you guys with that. Thank you guys again for tuning in. Tune in for the next episode where we'll talk about Divino Espinosa and what he's doing with his fight Sergio Chirino in Las Vegas, and then we'll keep pushing forward. So thank you guys again for tuning in, for all the love, the downloads. You guys already know you can follow me on Instagram. Help me grow that channel there on Instagram, and help me grow the channel overall. You guys are doing beautifully. Thank you so much for the continued downloads and the support, and for spreading the word. And let's get this show to new heights, hopefully by the end of this year. So I thank you guys. Have yourselves a great night, and check you all on the next episode.